Hey, what's up, everybody? This is an open discussion with C3 Films. My name is Chris, and this is.
Cheryl.
And today we're going to be talking about the entire season of The Last of Us. As of this recording, the season finale has just premiered last night. We have watched it, and we've also played the game. So we're going to be talking about spoilers for the games as well as this first season. So if you haven't played or watched this show, then do either one and then come back and see what we had to say about it. So let's go ahead and jump in. Yeah. So I'm kind of curious where to even start because there's so much to talk about if we're talking about like the whole season. I'm not
Well,
really sure.
let's start with what our first impressions were because we had already done an episode on I think it was the first two episodes of the season. I had not watched the playthrough of the game. I had only watched the first two episodes, and I think my overall opinion on it was that I would watch it because I feel like it would be interesting, but I didn't think it was grabbing my attention.
Okay.
And literally the week after that, everything changed for me.
Episode 3.
Yeah, I think you said that you were really digging it, but you were coming at it from the perspective of having played the game. So now that I've watched the playthrough, I'm like, yeah, I can see why you're all so gung ho about it. But it was really that third episode with the Bill and Frank story that
Yeah.
got me interested. After that, I watched the entire playthrough of the game
Nice.
um, because I didn't want to wait to find out what happens in the show.
Wow. Okay, that's interesting though, because now you have a point of comparison and it's fresh in your mind. So you probably recognized the changes even more so than I did, because the last time I played The Last of Us was in 2014. So it's been like 8 years since I played this game. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest difference was the introduction of Bill and Frank. So you
Hmm.
probably remember in the game, Frank doesn't really exist. He does exist, but he's already dead, and
Yeah.
he's just his body that has like no face or whatever.
Hmm.
And then Bill, actually, I liked the introduction of Bill it better in the
Hmm.
game than in the show. But the show, it's hard to say because like I think this being the biggest difference between the game and the show, I think is the easiest to talk about because of how big the differences are. But the way I would put it is that they're two different entities and
Hmm.
it kind of turns the show into a different thing from the game. So it's the same story being told, but being told in like a slightly different way, where like you're
Right.
still hitting the same points, but
Hmm.
you're doing it in a slightly different way. So, I mean, just that episode was just so good, and like I don't want to get too much into it because I want to be able to talk about the whole season. But
Hmm.
I really think that the game changer there was because of how I don't know what it is, but it was just really heartwarming and to see a perspective of
Hmm.
different characters where it's not about
Joel and
Joel
Ellie.
and Ellie. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that too. I think that that is one of the greatest deviations. It is the greatest deviation from the game. I also think it's like the the thing that the show benefits the most from. There's other little changes that they did, like they made Sam deaf in the show, and Sam wasn't deaf in the game. And I don't think that that's like I don't think it changes too much of that story. I think it still plays out. It can still play out exactly how it does, and that's exactly what happens. It plays out the exact same way, but it does add a new dynamic and element between how Ellie and Sam interact. So, and it wasn't one thing where I thought like one was better than the other in that scenario. I was just kind of like, okay, these are two different interpretations, and I think that they both work. I at first it caught me off guard. It was like, wait, he wasn't deaf in the game, but then I was like, okay, you know what? This is still working though. It's still working to have this relationship between them. They're able to communicate with this etch a sketch that they write on, which is going to lead to a powerful moment at the end when she writes one final note on it, which is "I'm sorry," and that's the last note that'll ever be written on it. And I'm like, okay, that's powerful. That's good. I do like it. It's not. I don't think that it's necessarily like 100% better than the game, but it's different, and I'm all for it.
Yeah, I definitely think there's some moments in the game that they did better than they did in the show.
Oh, we gonna talk about those.
um, but that's just another great example of like how I feel about the game versus the show, which is like they're just two different entities that cannot be like you almost can't compare, like you can compare the hell out of them, but then they're two different things, and I think that's the thing that may be hard for people to separate, is that they're not the same. They really aren't. They're two different mediums, yes, but they're also kind of two different stories, or rather the same story being told in different ways with the same story points. So
Yes.
like you keep like it's like the same wavelength, the same points being hit, but they're just kind of going off the line a little bit. So with Sam being deaf, I actually kind of liked, because I feel like they were kind of trying to diversify a little bit more, and I think it's always great to see deaf people and stuff on TV.
It was great to see the actor himself is deaf and
Yes.
played the role. So when I saw that, I was like, okay, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah. What I didn't like though that they added was the whole story of that woman
The
trying,
woman
yeah,
trying to
trying,
get Sam and Henry.
yeah, I didn't think that was necessary. But I also feel like in that storyline, the game did it better, because when Joel and Ellie first bump into those people that are part of that group, there was like 10 of them, and it just felt a little bit more dire, because it seemed like Ellie was actually in a lot of danger, whereas like in the show there's only like 3 guys. But
At
in
what point?
like when they drive into that city,
Oh, and they get hit by the trap. Gotcha.
yeah, and the
Yeah.
guy's like, "Oh, I'm hurt," and then Joel's
Mhm.
like, "No, he even
No, he
hurt."
ain't.
Yeah, no, he ain't. Yeah, and so I think in the game it's better, because he's a little bit more like rough in the game,
Yes.
and in the game like there's like 10 guys trying to like get hit by a car instead of crashing the car, and then Ellie's like being like, she's like in a chokehold from one of the guys, and then he has to go and save her and stuff like that. So a little bit scarier than in the show, because in the show they crash and then they run into the building that they crashed in and then they hide, and there's like 3 guys, and one of the guys
Yeah.
is Brandon.
Wow, she does not like Brandon. Yes, nope, you're 100% right. And like that's going to get into one of my biggest criticisms about the show, and it's the portrayal of Joel. There are things that I think that they did that works well, but I think overall and they went for a different interpretation. This is not the same, like Pedro Pascal's Joel is not the same Joel from the games. Like you just said, Joel from the games is a lot more rough, he's a lot more rugged, and he is not the type that's going to spill his feelings to his brother while crying about how he failed his daughter. That is not the Joel from the games. That is the Joel from the show. And so it's going, as somebody who's seen the games and actually kind of prefers that portrayal of Joel, seeing it in the show, it kind of made me take a step back, and it made me feel like this isn't being true to who I thought this character was. But for people who haven't experienced the game and their first experience is this version of Joel from Pedro Pascal, he does like he's these scenes are well acted. It's not like they're bad by any stretch of the imagination. They're really good, but they definitely are they're a very different portrayal than what I was prepared for. So if you come into this and you haven't seen the games, I think that this might still be like effective for you as like a newcomer to this franchise. Um, but for me, it felt a little odd, and then it feels even stranger when we get to the end, which we'll talk about later. But the last episode, because that Joel in the final episode feels like a completely different Joel from the rest of the show. And the final episode Joel is the most in line with video game Joel. But leading up to that, it does not feel like the Joel that we get from episode 1 through 8 is the same Joel that would do the things that he does in episode 9.
Yeah, and I think part of it might have to do with just the portrayal, but of, Pedro Pascal, like, having to play this character, and kind of having this slightly different take on it. But I think for me, like, I'm okay with how Joel is in the show, as opposed to Ellie, because I actually didn't really like the way they portrayed Ellie, and not that the actress, I don't know what
Bella
her name is,
Ramsey.
Belle Ramsey. She is an awesome actress. I think she did great. I think she like did really well in the show. My only problem with it is just that they made her kind of less likable. It's not her fault. It's just the direction of it is that they made her kind of less likable in the show than they did in the game, because in the game she's kind of less of a brat and she's more
She's endearing.
yeah, she's less combative, I think, with, like, she doesn't fight Joel as much. Like, she's actively trying to give Joel a hard time in the show. But in the game, I don't feel like that she's trying to work with him to accomplish the same goal. But at the beginning of the show, I feel like she was really making it hard for him.
Yeah, she's like she's like making it as difficult as she possibly can.
I'm
You're
glad.
100%
Yeah,
right.
I'm glad Diego agrees with me. But
Finally, someone says it. I've been feeling it. I want to shout it to Cheryl. Finally, someone said that.
but yeah, I think she's a phenomenal actress. Love her to death. But again, this just brings me back to saying that these are two different stories being told. They're on different wavelengths, and yeah, I mean, I think the other big difference between the game and the show is the lack of zombies, which I'm kind of okay with, because it's not really about zombies. It's more about the people and the characters. I think it could have used maybe a little bit more towards the end. Like, I think they could have kept it closer to the game, in that section with David and the cannibal episode, because there is that one moment in the game where she first meets him and the other guy goes back to the community to get the antibiotics for her, where she has to work with David to survive against the cordyceps. So I feel like that kind of opened it up to, like, because when I was watching, yeah, exactly, because when I was watching the game, I was like, why doesn't she trust him? Like, I get she doesn't trust him, but she was fighting him real hard, and I didn't, like, in the game I was like, why? In the show I can see more why, because he's like a little bit more, suspicious. But I think that moment in the game when they're like having to work together was a very important part to have.
I think so too. I actually forgot about it too, Zane. Like I said, it's been years since we played this game, but yeah, hearing you bring that up, I'm like, yeah, that's right. That's a good thing to include, and it reminds you that we are still in a world where people don't just die to people; they die to zombies. And it kind of goes. There's a couple of things around like the cordyceps that like bother me. And I think this is actually going to be just a personal preference. We talked about on our show where we talked about the first couple episodes, how I prefer, like, I like the spores because of a visual way to show that Ellie is immune, as opposed to just her having to get bit to prove that she's immune every time. Like, you can see her navigating this world, and the way that she can navigate this world in a way that no one else can is what makes her so unique and powerful. But in a world where there are no spores, she's navigating it just like everybody else. The only difference is that if one person would get bit and die, she would get bit and not. But she has to get bit and be in that situation. So, like, I definitely agree that I would have liked to see more, especially because they replace the spores with that whole hive mind thing, and it never comes back up again. And it's kind of like, why introduce this as such a major element of the world if you're not gonna play into it? You know, like part of me was thinking when we saw the Left Behind episode, which is another really great, fantastic like episode of the show. Like I thought that they were gonna play with that whole hive mind thing there, where they killed the one or stepped on a vine or something, and then all of a sudden the mall was gonna be loaded with undead or something. But you know, they only had to deal with that one. It almost felt like the show blew its budget after episode 5, and then there's like, yeah, we're no more makeup, no more cordyceps. Well, we can only have one or two on screen at a time, and then that's it.
Yeah, I mean, towards the end, it's like you forget that this is a zombie show. Because it's, I mean, it's not, but then it also is like you're building this world, this apocalypse world, and the reason why, all these people are, in survival mode is because of the cordyceps. But now it's not. It's like they don't even exist anymore. You can walk around and not have to worry about them because you're more worried about the people, but you don't have to deal with the cordyceps at all. So, I mean, at least in The Walking Dead, you get both. Like, both are a problem, and they're always consistently both a problem. Maybe sometimes more one than the other, but at least, it goes back and forth. Here, like, at the beginning, like, oh, yeah, the zombies are the problem. And then by the time you get to the end of the show, the people are the problem, and the zombies aren't even there anymore.
Yeah,
So,
and there's just I think that I agree. Like there needed to be what felt like a better balance between the two, right?
yeah.
So, and I want to talk about one more difference that I felt that I didn't think worked as well, only because it's a common TV trope. But when Joel gets injured, which leads to the whole winter thing, I sorry, I can't help but say that I prefer the game more because we've seen this over and over again in television shows where the hero and the villain are fighting and then the hero wins and then you think that everything's good. And they do it actually multiple times in this show too. And then the hero turns around and it turns out, oh no, I'm actually hurt and I got somewhere I got hurt in that fight. They do the same thing when Ellie is fighting the cordyceps and she turns around and it's like, and they have this moment like I won, and then you look down and it's like, oh no, I'm bit. They do it with her mom when her mom is fighting and it's like I won, and then I look down, oh my leg is bit, and it's just like it gets so freaking tired. So like when I saw that happen with Joel, I just couldn't help but roll my eyes, and I was like, of course. But at least in the game, like they're fighting and they fall off a ledge, and he lands on just a pipe or something that's just
it's like a
sticking out.
rebar.
A rebar that's just sticking out, and it's kind of just like, yeah, the environment actually is what did you in, not even like a person, just the environment. And so like, and I like that element of it of just like, yeah, it is just as much about like the environment being able to kill you as it is like the cordyceps or the people. And that just seems good to that just seemed better to me because it's like Joel is like this hardened like warrior that is able to fight, but sometimes an accident just happens, and it's like it's just if you had fallen where the other guy fell, you would have lived and that person be impaled. But yeah, so I did not like the way what led to Joel being injured in this. It felt weaker to me, but especially because it's a trope that we've seen in other things like this, or just superhero stuff or whatever, like anything with heroes, we've seen it. And then even within the context of this show itself, they do it multiple times as well. So it just got so old to me.
Yeah, I agree. That was definitely one of the moments, the big moments that I thought the game did way better. The only thing I could say about that though is I feel like him getting stabbed is a little and healing from that wound
Is more realistic.
is more believable than him being impaled by a rebar and then like just kind of getting up from it, and because it once you pull it out then you can very easily bleed to death. Yeah, so in the game I was like, how do you survive that? But
and maybe that's why they chose not to do it.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of get that, but then I wish they kept the part of him falling off the building at least. So yeah, I mean, just that whole scenario, like that was literally the only part of the game that I didn't really like too much. But yeah, for that section at least.
For
yeah.
sure.
But let's talk a little bit about the season finale, because I actually really enjoyed it, and I think the reason why I did is because they kind of they basically copied the game like shot for
Almost shot
shot,
for shot.
line by line. The only thing they added was the scene with Ellie's birth and her mom, which I thought was a great addition, especially since they used the actual actress that played the voice for Ellie in the game.
Yeah.
And she's also Pike from Fox
Yes.
Machina.
Yes. Ashley Johnson. So yeah, so I actually feel the opposite. I did not need that inclusion for me. I love the fact that Ashley Johnson plays Ellie's mom, and we even see Troy Baker in the episode before this as like a random henchman. The voice actor for Tommy is in this, and the voice actress for Marlene is actually playing Marlene herself. So, and even Laura Bailey, who did the voice of Abby from the second game, is one of the nurses in that final scene. So, like, they have so many of the voice cast as a part of the story, and I think that that's just so awesome to have those people that brought these characters to life have like some interaction. And I love the fact that Laura Bailey and I forget the actress's name, but the actress who plays Marlene actually have a scene together where they are talking, because these are two people that worked on the game that are now in this television show actually having conversation and interaction with each other. And it made me wish that Troy Baker could have met like the soldier guy that played Tommy in the game. Um but talking about the scene in itself, I don't think to be clear, I don't think it's like a terrible addition, but I do think for me it was one of those things where it's like I didn't need an answer for why she was immune. For me personally, like when we watch things like The Walking Dead or even like with The Last of Us, and we have like the outbreak and it happens and stuff like that, a lot of times we don't get an answer for why the outbreak happens. And I know for some people that's frustrating, but for me, I always like thought that that's fine, because it's like we're just here. This is just the state of the world. Like we don't know how it began. No one knows how it began. The people who probably know are all dead, and we just have to deal with it. So like, as someone who like in the games and stuff, they never address how or why. They never give a reason for Ellie's like immunity, and I was like, I'm cool with that. It's just she just is. But here they give like an actual reason, and the effectiveness of that reason can that's going to come down to an individual. But my first thought was like, oh, okay, so if you want to get immune, just get bit while you're giving birth. Got it. So I don't know. Either way, they can always feel like kind of contrived, because it can feel contrived that of course like this random person is immune, and it can feel contrived that of course this person that got like born while her that their mother was like infected didn't get infected, when in other media the baby would be infected. So like either way it could feel contrived, but for me personally, I just felt like I didn't want to know.
What's for Last of Us 3? No,
Yeah, probably. You're probably right.
but no, I mean, I see what you mean. Like, I didn't really need to know either. I just thought it was kind of nice to bring her in and give her a part. And it actually, like, it kind of gave a good reason for her to be there to explain, why Ellie's immune. And have, that character in the show so that we can actually, like, meet her. And actually they look very similar, so like they actually look like they could be related. So
Related. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
You're lucky casting there.
It's definitely for the fans of the game, I think, to like have her in the show, like have a reason for her to be in the show. So but other than that, I think the season finale was great. I think they did it so good. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
Fix
And
it.
that's exactly what they did for that last episode. Be it they did add the scene with the mom, but it didn't really affect the outcome of the show anyway. It's just a little extra thing.
Yeah, and like I said, and like it's an extra detail that some people will be like, "Oh, that's great." Other people will be like, "Yeah, I don't know about it." But either way, it doesn't hurt the show. I don't think it hurts the show at all. And if you guys look back at our initial talk on The Last of Us, I say in that talk that I want to see how they do the ending, because I don't see how it's not just the game ending, because the game ending is perfect. So it's just got to be that ending, right? And that's exactly what they did, because Yeah, they know. That ending is one of the best endings to anything. It's just like games, movies, television shows. It is just a good culmination. Like in many ways, The Last of Us is almost better because of its ending than the actual game itself. And I think that's what people remember because it's so poignant. And that moment when she says, "Swear to me," and he's like, "I swear." She takes a pause and she just says, "Okay," and then it's credits. It's this great moment. And then like when the game first came out, people are like, "Well, does she believe him? Does she not believe him?" And she's just accepting it. And it's like one of those ambiguous endings that is only ambiguous because of how an actor emoted a line.
Mm-hmm.
That line, the way that line is said, is such a powerful. It's one word, but that one word makes you immediately wonder, oh, like, does she know? Does she not know? And it's so fun. And then the fact that it just goes to credits after that, perfect. And I'm so glad that the show decided to take the same route.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I was kind of worried that they were gonna do something different, but I was so happy seeing that they were really following the show to the T. Even the part where he shoots everybody, and that's actually the part where you're having to play the game to look for Ellie. So, and then
Yeah.
escape. So,
And like I was saying earlier in this talk, I think that that's actually when Joel feels the most like Joel,
yeah.
from the games at least, and like from what my expectation was for that character. But once again, for me personally, it almost felt kind of at odds. But I can see an argument for like why now he's fighting so hard, as opposed to before where he wasn't able to fight as hard. Like he was barely able to handle, like you said, three guys, but now he's being Chuck Norris and killing everybody in like it's an action movie. So I can see an argument for both, but for me, there's a little bit of a disconnect. It kind of feels like we haven't earned this moment as much from the point of me believing that he could be this effective. Like
Mm-hmm.
I love the moment, I love the scene. Like you said, it's very reminiscent of the game. It shows how much of a force Joel is to be reckoned with. But it also just feels weird because up until this point, he has not shown himself to be this capable when handling multiple enemies
Mm-hmm.
by himself and not taking damage. I mean, he even takes damage from just fighting one guy. He gets stabbed, right? So somehow he's able to make it cut through all these people and not take a single bullet. I guess.
Yeah, I mean, now that you mention it, it kind of makes me think about just his overall arc and what they did different in the show than they did in the game. And that was making him kind of, less rugged and less, rough at the beginning of the
Mm-hmm.
show because they kind of start him off as kind of a softy a little bit, but
Oh
not
yeah.
because he also talks a lot about how we're not good people. I've killed people. I'm not a good person. I do bad things and stuff like that. But when he meets Ellie, he kind of doesn't really do it, and I think
Yeah.
she becomes kind of like a motivator for her or for him to not do those things, especially in front of her, because even though he is like unwilling to accept that he is starting to develop this relationship and bond with her where he really cares for her as a father figure, he doesn't really accept it until later in the show,
Right.
which I kind of felt was a little abrupt, but in the show, but
It did feel a little bit abrupt in the
yeah.
show. I agree.
But it
I
makes
agree.
sense though, because then by the time we get to the end, he kind of just like throws it all away and he's like, you know what? Like
Screw it.
for my girl, I'm gonna do the worst
Murder
thing
everyone.
ever for her, but like he still shields her from it. And so I kind of like that. I kind of like that they, developed him into like from, this kind of soft guy to someone who is just like I'm gonna murder you and
Murder the heck
and
out
I'm
of you.
but then when he's with Ellie, he goes back to that soft side. So you kind of see like how he is with her versus like what he would do for her to protect her.
Right.
Like
No, that makes a
what
lot
he
of sense.
brings out because of her.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, like I think that makes a lot of sense the way you described it. and one of the other things that I want to bring up, this is actually more of a criticism of the game and the show from a story perspective, and that is that all of this is Marlene's fault.
Yes.
all of this is all of this is absolutely Marlene's fault. And Marlene herself as a character is very inconsistent because so first off, we know this is Marlene's fault because she tries to do this without Ellie's consent. She tries to do this while she's sleeping. It's almost like they're trying to get away with something. And then she also tells Joel what they're doing without expecting that he's going to try and do anything to stop it, which is just dumb. You either lie to him and say that she's fine, you'll see her shortly, or you just don't even let him out of the room. So, and you know what? Oh, you hate Marlene in real life? Yeah, well, we're about to make you hate her more. So, like, they get to the point where they're in that garage, and Joel's like, it's not your decision to make. And she's like, yeah, you're right. It's not yours either. Okay, fair points. You're both making fair points. It's not your decision. It's Ellie's. And then Marlene has the nerve to be like, well, what do you think Ellie would decide? You know what she would decide. And I'm like, okay, well, if you know what Ellie would decide, why didn't you wait for her to wake up and just have a conversation with her? Your friend's daughter, who you vowed to protect, and now you're about to kill, if you know that she would just say yes, why wouldn't you just wait for her to wake up, ask her, give her the choice? She's going to say yes, and then once you do that, Joe can't even lie to Ellie about what happens.
Yeah,
he literally can't.
And he has to accept her choice.
He has to accept her choice.
And at least they have a moment to say goodbye to each other.
Yeah,
like she kind of stole that moment from him.
Yeah,
like you can't just take her away and like not give him a chance to say goodbye to her,
right? Or even give her a chance to like decide the fate of her own life.
Yeah,
especially if you do believe that she's going to say yes anyway.
I mean, I think she's right. I think she would have said yes to do it.
I think she's right too.
But then it would have been but then that would have been too nice of a story.
Yeah, no, and when I talked to my roommate, I said the only reason that didn't happen is because we need the story to happen.
Yeah.
But I think that's also one of the failures, unfortunately, one of the few criticisms I can have of the show as well as the game is that contextually that decision from Marlene does not make sense. But it needs to happen in order for the end of the game to happen, or the end of the show to happen.
Yeah.
So oh yeah, there's that too. The thing with Marlene was also her saying Ellie was asking about Joel, but they kept her asleep. Yeah, it's like, how is she asking about Joel if she's still asleep and being prepped for surgery? She didn't even know that she was getting drugged when she woke up in the car.
Oh, I kind of took that as like she was asking if he was okay before they put her to sleep.
Oh, maybe that's what they meant.
Yeah.
I just know when she woke up in the car, she didn't even know that she was drugged.
Oh yeah. Oh, plot hole. Whoops.
That's all.
That's why we talk about it.
Right. But at the end of the day, my decision on The Last of Us show is that it is absolutely a good show. It is a fine way to experience this story if you did not or unable to play the game. But for me personally, I still think that the game, as the original way that this story was conceived, is the pinnacle of how to experience the story. I think that is the best way to experience a story if you had to choose one or the other. But if you're unable to play the game for any reason, because either you don't play games or you don't want to watch a walkthrough, then if you want to sit through a show so that you can experience that story, I think that the show does a good enough job.
Yeah, I've been telling everyone to watch the playthrough just so they can get like a comparison, because they, like I keep saying, they're two different storytelling ways. And they're really two different sets of characters as well. So I definitely would encourage people to watch the walkthrough of the game if you're not going to plan on playing it.
Absolutely, I concur. Definitive experience right there.
Yeah, and this is one of the best video game to live action
adaptations.
Yeah, that I've seen.
Yeah, it's definitely up there. So, but yeah, any last minute thoughts before we get out of here? We've been going for a while.
Yeah, I think I got it off my chest.
All right, that's what's up. So, what did you guys think about The Last of Us? The season finale, the entire season. Did you enjoy it? Have you played the games? Have you experienced the games? And how do you feel like this is as an adaptation? Like, do you appreciate the differences that they took, the differences they make? Were you happy seeing the voice cast like in live action, like doing different roles related around these characters? And would you recommend it? Which would you recommend to a friend, the game or the show? Whatever you thought about all of these things and more, comment below. Let us know. And we're down there. If you give us a like, share, and subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and I did not like Brandon.